let's say y'all, for instance, right? Y'all have each had your own journeys, right, in this topic, right, and very profound ones. What are the differences like before you had this profound experience to after, right? Like before and after, what is that big change, right? Like what? How does that change your kind of journey? Does that make sense? What I'm asking? I hope it does. I don't know. Did I
Yeah,
say it right?
absolutely. I mean, no, totally. I completely know what you mean. So, um, I had an experience about 3.5 years ago now that's hard to explain, but it felt like some sort of an altered kind of consciousness where I sort of saw outside of the flow of space time. And it changed me. It completely changed everything about how I see myself, how I see the world. And, you know, I think I'm still unpacking a lot of what those changes mean. But I do think that,
Sure.
like a lot of people who come through an anomalous experience, that they, end up feeling um, like they have a sense of purpose that they didn't have before, that there's like maybe a direction that they're supposed to be moving. And that was something that, and sometimes is still hard for me to talk about because there's part of me that's like, that sounds crazy. But I mean, the more I talk to other people, the more I realize that this is a data point, right? This is how this stuff impacts people. I became much more concerned about um, spiritual things. I don't talk about that nearly as much in my work because I kind of want people to find their own path. But like that's definitely in terms of what I'm personally concerned with, something that's become much more important. Um, and yeah, it's just changed the way I see everything. When you start to recognize, I really was living within this paradigm personally where I thought there was nothing but the physical materialist world, and that when you died, that was it. And I got popped out of that in just kind of like a second one day, and there's no way once you see it to go back. And so, that's been my journey. Jay's is different, which is kind of cool, and it's made a cool dynamic between us because this is more of a lifelong thing for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I thank you, Kelly.
Mhm.
Yeah, and for me, I'm sure a lot of people, a fair amount of people that are listening may know some aspects of that or my story or what have you.
Sure.
But when like the kind of broad strokes are, when I was a young kid, I lived in not one but a couple houses that were what you would consider to be haunted. And so there would be like poltergeist phenomena, like weird shadow figures, apparitions, um, really kind of the kind of stuff that really makes you question from the get-go, um, what's a body, what's an intelligence, what is space-time, like how can objects be affected in a situation like this. And I was young, in the first house I was 6 years old. And then strangely enough, when I got a little bit older, um, I had the first experience with UFO and HI phenomena. And there were two grays in my bedroom in southern Indiana, when I was about 9 years old or so. And I still don't know what to make of all that. I don't know where they're from. I don't know what their names were. I don't know if they had names.
Yeah.
I have fleeting memories of situations like that. And I don't pretend to know. I don't pretend to know like why that house seemed to be haunted. I don't pretend to know what those grays were or whether they still exist or anything like that. And so that really shaped the whole course of my life. Sometimes I'll get asked like, what would your life be like if those situations hadn't happened? And like, I have no idea, because like that's been my whole life. You know what I mean? I can't remember very well a time before things got weird.
Yeah.
And not only that, but like it got weird for my whole family. You know what I mean? And like it got weird for my ex-girlfriends and like some of my very closest friends. I mean, for Pete's sakes, there's been like weird anomalous stuff just from like Kelly and I hanging out the last few years. There are some people, and I know a bunch through the experiencer group, that it seems like they're almost magnets for anomalous activity. And for better or worse, like some people think of me as that. And I don't know what to make of that. All I can do is like dig in, explore, connect dots, and like move forward. And so it's been baked in from the beginning. It's like I got drafted before I even knew that there was a baseball game being played. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I can't imagine. Uh, you know, yeah, I can't imagine. To be honest, do you feel like were those experiences frightening? You know, like scared? Did you feel? Do you feel
Yeah.
frightened in your daily life, or is this something you get used to? I mean, clearly, it sounds like something both of y'all didn't ask for. It just happens, and then what do? You got to deal with it, right? Or what? I mean, that's life, right? You got to move ahead. So I can't imagine if it felt frightening how to push past that.
Yeah. I mean, like, I think that there's an element. I'll speak first, just since it's continuing on that last question. I think that the weird thing about the haunted house, at 6, is that when you're that age, when you're that young, like whatever is happening it's often your first time encountering something. It's like the
Yeah,
first time you go to a beach, it's the first time you get on a plane, it's the first time you're on a school bus, all that kind of stuff. And
yeah,
and new things are happening all the time, every day. Oh, it's the first time I had Chinese food, whatever it is. And you just accept it as like what the world is. And so though there were scary moments, it wasn't as scary to me. And strangely, like some of the high strangeness things, there's a nature versus nurture, there's a chicken and the egg issue here. And like to me, like things were always looser than they were to other people. Like for example, in that first haunted house, there'd be situations, there'd be like a knock on the wall, right? There would be like a loud noise, like a bang. You'd look over like towards the source of it, and then you'd look back to where you were just looking, and the objects would have been moved around, right? Like some kind of strange prankster, trickster, poltergeist activity, right? And
God,
yeah, that sounds really scary, right? I mean, that's
yeah,
like like a lot of people would consider that an objectively scary, or like something that's meant to scare somebody. And
sure,
to a degree it was, and at the same time also, because of my age and because of my childlike mentality and things like that, I just took it as true because it was obviously true. It was happening right in front of me. And there's also the thing where it's like when you're that age, people, you'll see a magician, you'll see David Copperfield or David Blaine on TV, and they'll do like a little cup trick or a card trick or something like that. And there's a playfulness to it. And
yeah,
for whatever reason at that age, some of that stuff reached me as being playful rather than scary. And like, I think that like navigating that boundary, and then other things were scary, like those shadow beings, for example. Um,
sure,
and like navigating that boundary between playfulness and scary and like what's possible, um yeah, it's really informed me in such a way that here I am, and it's like 40 years later. I just turned 46 years old, and I'm still ruminating on these issues like I was back then, and I will continue to be like I through the rest of my life, I'm sure.
yeah, right on.
Kelly,
Yeah.
Well, you
Yeah,
you
I mean,
yeah,
the scary the
yeah, mine
scary
mine are a
Kelly.
little different. Scary. Mine are a little different because it's mine weren't scary, but that doesn't mean that they weren't traumatic, because I think that there is something really traumatizing that happens. I mean, the experience that I had where I kind of experienced that altered state of consciousness rewired who I was on a fundamental level in like 90 seconds, maybe like under 2 minutes.
sure,
It was so fast. And I'm a happier person as a result of it. I'm a more fulfilled person. I think I'm a more useful person. I have a sense of purpose about my life. But at the same time, I can't unknow the fact that at one moment I believed one thing and saw the world one way, and in the next moment, seemingly without my consent, um, that I suddenly saw the world entirely differently. And that can be that is traumatizing. It just is. We talk about ontological shock and all of that. But in some ways, even that's a good thing. I think that, moving through it definitely makes me more skeptical. It makes me more paranoid. But it also, I'm definitely more skeptical of my own thoughts, because I understand that how much they can change, and I realize how contingent what I believe is. And so it makes me it makes me question myself a lot more, which can be a destabilizing place to exist, and to live your life in a place where you feel like you have to question yourself all the time isn't easy. And that in of itself has been really traumatizing. But I think that in terms of what it brings to my work and how it can kind of, in some ways it keeps me wondering if you're crazy, in some ways keeps you from going crazy. So I'm,
Sure.
I'm grateful for it in that respect. But yeah, it's a head trip. I don't know what to make of it.
Yeah. No, of course. Like, what do y'all have any like hopes? Like any, you know, I guess let's put it this way: if you could, I guess more for you, Jay. I guess, well, Kelly too. I guess you continue to have experiences. Like, if you could make it stop, would you, or would you? Do you want to it to continue to happen? These experiences.
Um, as as far as it goes for me, like I made a very conscientious effort in my 20s to make it stop, through sheer force of will or like shifting my behavior. I did a lot of experimentation. Like maybe if I just stay up all night, like nothing will happen. Maybe if I live like this, it'll happen. Maybe if I eat this, or,
Oh, I
I
see.
tried to
Yeah.
change my patterns like over and over and over again to try that. And it didn't work. And in fact, what I found was that in a certain situation, and this is completely subjective, and I could be totally wrong about this, but the more that I wanted it to stop, it seemed like there were situations that were more demonstrative and were underlining the fact that like that wasn't going to happen, that it just wasn't going to happen, and that this was my life. And um, it really, it was hard. It was very hard because like I lost friends. There are people that I dated that didn't want to, that they'd wake up in the middle of the night and like all manner of things were going on, and they weren't into it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, how do you do that? How do you, like, somebody that's in college? I was in my 20s. Like everybody, we're all just trying to make our way in the world, and at that age, like you're trying the best you can. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Of
And
course.
it's hard. And like nobody wants to be alone. Everybody wants to feel loved. Everyone wants to love somebody else. And it's hard to figure out like how to have that conversation, especially in a society, in a world where you're meant to feel crazy just for experiencing it. So what? You get infatuated with somebody, you go out on some dates and you're like, gosh, I could really spend some time with this person. I could really like, I think I could really love this person. Maybe they'll love me too. And then like, when do you bring that up? Like, when do you bring up like, if you sleep with me regularly, like eventually you're going to see some wild stuff and it might break your brain a little bit. It might terrify you. Like, when do you bring that up? And so in terms of like your hopes and like
Wow.
what you want, like, I hope, and like one of our big aims with Cosmosis, and one of my aims with the Experiencer Group, and just like the general thrust of things is like not just normalizing these conversations, but really, really going the next step and like providing frameworks for people, and like trying to contextualize things and bring nuance to the conversation, and doing it in an honest way. So it's not just like, oh, there's a ship in the sky. A lot of people can't relate to that. But if you bring up like the whole range of experience, the whole range of anomalies, it starts to become much more relatable to people. Because like on our show, when you show the Venn diagram where precognition and things like that come into play, all of a sudden it becomes more relatable, because almost everybody has somebody in their family, or a friend, if it's not themselves, that has shown to have something like that. It just is like that. Like, who hasn't had the situation where it's like, somebody random is going to call right before they call, and it's like there's no rational reason why they did, or like you feel the sense of being stared at from behind, and you're like, who the hell is staring at me? People report that all the time. It's like a common
Yeah.
occurrence, right? And yet like it's made to seem like magic, and it's not. In the case of like the sense of being stared at, a lot of neurologists will point at mirror neuron transmitters, and like they'll say like, oh, it's your mirror neuron transmitters, that's what's doing that. And it's a predator prey phenomenon, and you've been involved to do it, and that's very likely true. But like, like the difference between magic and science, it's there's a thin boundary there. So like exploring that, really pushing into that so that we can have more intimacy with each other, so that we can know each other better. In our show, there's Courtney in episodes 1 and 3, and like the way that him being able to talk about his anomalous experiences with his grandmother, who also had anomalous experiences, and his son, who also has anomalous experiences, it gave them a depth and a richness to their family that like is so amazing and like enviable even. Like I wish that like in my family history when I was that boy's age, that there would have been that kind of openness and honesty about these things. And we can work to create a future where that is possible.